Hello and welcome to another episode of The Defenders on Sansad TV. And in this special episode, we have with us the privilege of having Shri Baba Kalyani, who is quite clearly leaps ahead of all his nearest rivals in the space of making military equipment for India, and his initiatives with his company Bharat Forge has led him to assert, and I think for us to believe, that Bharat Forge could one day be probably the world's leading artillery weapon systems manufacturer and provide India the shot in the arm that it needs to strategically move away from being a major importer to one of the largest exporters in the world in the very near future. So welcome on the show, sir.
Thank you, Maroof.
And I'd like you to start with to give us the context in which you decided to go into this space.
You know, it was almost the beginning of the 2000s, 2004, 2005 time period, when we had pretty much got done with our global acquisitions and making our company global. We are India's first manufacturing multinational.
Okay.
Yeah. So we set up a lot of plants outside India, in Germany, in Sweden, in France, in the United States. And in Sweden, we have a factory that produces forged components for the Swedish or the Scandinavian and European automotive industry, largely commercial vehicles, companies like Volvo, Scania, people like that, Mercedes. And within about 1.5 kilometers of our plant was the Bofors plant. So the whole story really starts there. And I used to always stay in this famous hotel called the Bofors Hotel, because it's the only hotel in Karlskoga, in that town, decent hotel. And I got to know a lot of people from the Bofors company. I even went and visited with them. And you know that in those days, India had imported 400 plus Bofors 155 39 millimeter howitzers. So the Bofors name was well known to people like us who are in business and who has something to do with defense. So when I went there and had a look at what they were doing, and you know, it just suddenly struck me that here we are, one of the world's leading metallurgical company who understands materials, metallurgy, how to make a forging very well. Why can't we make a gun? And the idea really got incubated at that time because of my connections with Sweden, having a plant in Sweden. And then we had some young engineers in our company in those days. I put a couple of them on the job. I said, we want to make a gun. So let's at least find out what a gun looks like. So we got a prototype of a gun from a company in Europe. Through the whole process, we had to go and get a license from the Defense Ministry, etc. And it took time, but we got through that process. And then we got the gun here. When we look at the gun, we said, you know, this is what we can make, this is what we can make, this is a forging, this is a forging, this is a forging. So I said, we should be making a gun. So we put a target that 2012, when the Defense Expo was going to take place in Delhi, we will showcase our Indian-made gun. We had called it that time Bharat 52. So we made a gun, our own gun, with our own components, and we showcased it.
That's how it all started. In fact,
that's how it all
it's
started.
Interesting you mentioned 2012 Def Expo, and it was then that I had the privilege of first interacting with you, though very briefly. And on the sidelines of the Def Expo, of course, since then you've moved dramatically forward. And as I was mentioning to some of your colleagues earlier, that I think it is fair enough to say that your company set the tenor and the tone for Make in India initiatives, at least in the defense sector. So, do you feel that as the buzzword Make in India has come to stay, you haven't really received the kind of recognition for your initiatives, or you feel it's all for the greater good and what you were doing has become part of an ocean of ideas that are now doing the rounds? But how many people are meeting those benchmarks even now?
You see, I mean, honestly, for me, all this thought process really came out of doing something for the country. I was quite upset with my own self that as a country for almost 50 odd years we are not able to produce the kind of military hardware, and when you look at artillery, we can't make an artillery gun in our own country even when we had artillery plants. And that made me pretty emotionally charged up as to why can't we do this, why can't Indians make these things happen. So for me it was more like a idea that we should do something for the country. I never looked at it at that point in time as a business proposal or trying to get, because I had no orders from anybody. There was no RFQ pending or there was no RFI or anything. It was just our own money and investing human resources and trying to get an idea to fruition. And this has always been the DNA of Bharat Forge. We have always done things for the future. We have always put India on the map. You take automotive components. We became the company that put India on the world map. We became the first company that started exporting products to big OEMs like Mercedes, like Audi, like General Motors, Ford, and then the rest of the country followed. So we have always been kind of initiators of this whole Make in India concept. And when Prime Minister Modi formalized the whole Make in India process in December 2014, this whole idea took a big jump and a big impetus. Because at that time, Indian companies, we really didn't have the manufacturing license to make defense products.
Right.
And then because of this whole Make in India conference that we had in Delhi in the Vigyan Bhavan in December 2014, directions were issued by the Honorable Prime Minister that this needs to happen. And DPIIT that time got into the act, and I think in a very short period of time, all of us who applied for a license to make defense products got our licenses.
Wow.
And then the whole game really started. When the game started that, in India's defense sector is now open to the private sector. The public sector was always in the defense sector, the ordnance factories and DPSUs were always there. When the private sector got into the play, people took, two different tracks. One track was you go and get a technology, you go and tie up with some company in Israel or in France or in the UK or in the US or in Korea, and you bring their product in and do sell it in India with some indigenous content, etc. But the problem with that is you are never going to own the IP rights for that. You're never going to be able to improve that product to the second generation, third generation. You'll have to go back to those guys every time you want some upgrades to happen. And this is what you see happening even today.
Yeah, that is, in fact, sir, you brought me to my next question. Point of sounding a bit blunt, I feel there is a vested lobby of people who feel that if everything was indigenized and everything was at home, then how do they benefit from this constant interaction, engagement and getting कि हम टेक्नोलॉजी और सोर्स करने जा रहे हैं. We have proven, and there is an area where you'll agree, we have proven to the world that we can be as good as any in the world, and that is in missile technology. And why? Because as one informed person told me, that because of this restrictions put on India to import critical missile related technology led us to go the missile and satellite route without seeking outside involvement. So I believe that time now is right for all the steps to be in place, because if you look at Israel, that came into being at the same time as us, 48, we were 47, 1947. But in that span of time, Israel has produced so many path-breaking technologies. One of them, I believe, you are partnering in it, in the Barak missile program. So can you give me an idea of the challenges and restrictions you operated with till you were able to just sustain your team to overcome all that, and when the governmental orders were given that yes, you will get the licenses?
You know, I think 2014 was the turning point with this whole concept of Make in India. Then as this started happening and we, along with many other companies, started showing off our wares in the defense expos. The first one was in 2012. The next one was 2 years later. I think the defense expos take place almost every 2 years. So as we started showing off our wares, I think the services started taking notice of it. When we first showed our gun in 2012, a lot of general officers walked by our booth and looked at it. Okay, but clearly
didn't take much interest.
Yeah. Clearly, the body language was that these guys can't make this. ये कहीं से तो जुगाड़ करके लाया और बिठाया यहाँ.
I think if I remember correctly, at least my magazine, The Salute, carried your gun on its cover.
Our Defense Research Development Organization, DRDO, took an interest and said, let us develop an indigenous gun. Okay, along with private sector partners, because private companies were beginning to show their hardware in the defense expos, and they put in a specification which I at that time thought was very difficult and crazy, but today I think that's the best thing that ever happened. They put in specifications which were extremely futuristic, which no artillery gun in the world has been able to perform. And that is how the ATACS came into being, the Advanced Towed Artillery Gun. And what are the specifications? The specification was, A, it should be able to fire what is called Zone 7. Zone 7 is a much higher pressure in the barrel. It had a chamber of about 25 liters. Because of a bigger chamber, you can put a bigger charge into it, and the bigger charge gives you a higher velocity. Therefore, you get a higher range. We have got a range of 48 kilometers.
Yes, sir.
That is 8 kilometers more than any other towed gun in the world. And 8 kilometers more means you can be behind the enemy line of fire. Nobody can even touch your gun, and you can fire. And this, in the Ukraine war today, The Economist has just recently written an article that the French gun Caesar has been able to increase its chamber in the barrel to 23 liters and fire 41 kilometers. And that is proving to be a big advantage in the war, because the guns that they use today, the M777, which is the 39 caliber 155 millimeter gun, can fire only 29 kilometers.
That was normally the range given to medium artillery.
Yes, even our Bofors gun fires only 29 kilometers. Now compare 29 kilometers with 48 kilometers. You're going 19 kilometers further.
Which is medium plus field plus more.
So this was one target. The second target they put was it should be an all-electric gun. Nobody has ever made an all-electric gun, artillery gun in the world. Third target was its accuracy and consistency has to be half of, half the range of a normal artillery gun. Okay, nobody has been able to do this. Now, today we just finished our trials in Pokhran, confirmatory trials, and everything was proven. Everything we were able to do. Now, while going through this process, we had started off with making things as per the DRDO design. Of course, it was a great effort between the scientists at DRDO and the engineers with the two companies that were working with DRDO, Bharat Forge and Tata Power ACD. I mean, amazing collaborative environment. But since we didn't have any electronics background of creating the control system, the control computer and all that, we were depending on a Israeli company to give us all this. They gave us the system, but they didn't give us the codes to change the software. So when you're making trials, you need to adjust something, you need to change something. We couldn't do it. So we were stuck. So 1 year ago, 1.5 years ago, I made a decision that let us develop this ourselves here. And we developed this along with a company, local company in Pune. And now that thing performs better than any other computer-based software and electronics that I have seen anywhere in a gun.
No, that's clearly to me, the most fascinating part of your journey, that at every stage you came across a major obstacle and you overcame it with globally surpassing the best figures available by coming up. It just shows that had we taken the route that you have taken maybe 25-30 years earlier, we wouldn't have put precious money into buying systems that goes and it benefits other industries and not ours. So where do you feel that you need greater encouragement from the government in terms of support and in terms of commitment that just allows you to put all your effort into many more multiples of growth?
I think I think the government is completely supporting and backing this entire process of indigenous production. I mean, the whole Atmanirbhar Bharat movement is something that has created a spark with many Indians. Okay, it is something like I use the terminology to say the emotional quotient of all Indians has changed.
Right.
Now, if you get emotionally involved with saying that we want to make India great and we want to do something for the country, okay, then everything else is aside and you start working in that direction. And I think Prime Minister Modi's whole concept, his talks, his focus, his focus on changing policy, and especially in the defense sector, has dramatically created a new emotional quotient for India and for Indians. This whole concept of nationalism has got a different meaning. Nationalism is not just political nationalism. Nationalism is you want to make India great. You want to make India into a great economic power. Now, a country of 1.4 billion people cannot be a great economic power if you are not able to produce your own military hardware.
Absolutely, sir.
Okay?
Absolutely.
And simple things like artillery guns or small arms or ammunition or things like that. So clearly, we have taken the gauntlet in this area and we have developed technologies. There's a fantastic organization called DRDO. They have labs here in Pune, ARD, which is one of their big labs with whom we are collaborating. And there are brilliant scientists all over the place. And there are other governmental laboratories, there are private laboratories. We have our own tech center, we have our own R&D center. And we have used every means possible to find solutions to a problem that we faced.
In fact, you touched on again an issue I wanted to bring out. I remember listening in person to the Prime Minister's speech at the Madison Square Gardens in New York, where he talked of some of India's inherent assets. One of them was the demographic dividend. I would like to distill it down to the demographic dividend that the Indian mind brings to bear in initiative where the Indian mind is motivated to apply itself. So yours is a classic example, and I find that there is that one area that we have applied ourselves, and I find artillery systems in particular became a game changer in our military thinking during Kargil. After that, there was talk about artillery wasn't a combat support arm, but it was a combat arm, which is a big shift in military thinking. Simultaneously, another aspect which alerted us to the need to be self-sufficient was not having to go in a crisis looking for ammunition, both of which is provided by your company. Can you give us some leading direction in that direction? What got you going after Kargil?
During the Kargil conflict, India ran out of the ammunition for the Bofors gun.
I know.
And suddenly I got a call from the Defense Ministry in New Delhi, from the
assistant.
Advisor, that we need this and we need this like yesterday. And you need to start producing it. Okay? And he was sending somebody here with an order, purchase order. He actually told me, please tell what your price is on the phone. There was no tender, nothing, because then it was an emergency. I said, we'll worry about the price later, we will start the production. So we made, in 4 or 5 months' time, we made 50,000 shells for the war and the war effort. Of course, we had to do a lot of things within our equipment. We had the basic equipment to make shells, the forging part of it, but you have to machine it, you have to put a copper band, you have to get it all installed, and it had to be tested, it had to pass all the requirements, it had to be then proof-fired to see that everything is working right. But everything happened absolutely well, and we made that. Unfortunately, after that, we never got an order again, because in those days, private sector was not supposed to be making these things. Okay, it's just that we had equipment, so the ordnance factories were not able to make it. Nobody else was ready to give this equipment, and somebody in the Defense Ministry must have thought Bharat Forge can do it. Let's go to them and get this, and we made that happen. Today, our concepts are different. We have now made guns. We have made 6 artillery platforms. There is no company in the world, Maroof, that has made 6 artillery platforms in 7-8 years. No company in the world. Even I have heard, generals and brigadiers from Pentagon who have visited us tell me that, what you guys have been able to do, even the US Army has not been able to do. So I think this is something that we must recognize, that India has some traditional skill sets, and metallurgy is one area where companies like us have skill sets that are at global levels. I think we are amongst the top 2 or 3 companies in the world in the area of metallurgy, and our guns are proving that, our products are proving that, whatever we are making. So we are now looking at ammunition, which we are designing this ammunition that will go through this gun and fire 120 kilometers.
Wow.
Okay? Rocket assist hypersonic ammunition. So we have started the process. There are a lot of companies in the US and Europe who are also working similarly on designs. So there is nothing that is impossible to do. We have the brain power, we have scientists, young scientists who have a lot of josh in them and a lot of dam to make things happen. We have older people who have a lot of experience to make these things happen. We have computing power, we have simulation capabilities, all kinds of things available with us. It's like during the COVID times, what happened? Why did we succeed in combating COVID? We broke all the silos and everybody worked together, and then all of a sudden in 6 months we had vaccines, we had PPE kits, we had ventilators, we had everything. The same thing is here. All we need to do is break the silos.
So to that extent, I could probably end on this note to say that, the projection by the Raksha Mantri that in the next few years we could be looking at even exporting up to 5 billion or upwards worth of weapons platforms and going into trillions eventually. I hope so. I think your company would be at the forefront of such initiatives.
We are very clear that by 2030 we will be one of the largest exporters of artilleries in the world.
Right, and both going back to the Kargil conflict and now the conflict in Ukraine, artillery is increasingly becoming the go-to weapons platform, as against the traditionalists would continue to argue that the era of tanks is not over yet. But I think there are standoff distance related weapons platforms like artillery, which will obviously be game changers. And I think on a happy note, I could end by saying there is a saying in some military units that if it's difficult, we'd like to do it. If it's impossible, we'll take a little time. So I think that could be a term that could be easily attributable to you and your company's initiatives. Thank you very much, sir, for your absolutely riveting insights into how India has actually quickly turned the corner with Make in India initiatives, and Bharat Forge is in the lead. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Maroof.